know, like one of the things they'll often do is they'll say, well, Deagle, if all the stuff you're telling is true, you're either crazy or why are you walking around alive? And I says, because I'm being protected on the supernatural level, on the cosmic level, and on the spiritual level, and also on the physical. I mean, there's a lot on the physical level too. And there's a number of people even within the organizations you might call the Illuminati, the CFR, and so on that are actually see what's going on and see the insanity of it.
They're not all evil.
Let's go from exactly where you are, because you're before the council. They're making a decision.
Right.
And are they conscious that you're there? Did they invite you in?
Oh, they bring you right in. It's like a courtroom, you know, so that we will understand it. Of course, what they do is they give you a surrounding that you can identify with. So for me, I was in a physical courtroom, and there's all these other human beings that are actually like in the witness box, 24 of us, and they were being brought forward one at a time, and then our consciousness would be uploaded for all of those beings to actually see all our life experiences and the information in the world and so on, and you see all these images, and actually because we were in the box we could actually see what was being witnessed by the others.
Okay, but you're also being given a message to take back.
Right, the message to bring back is, if you want to call it, it's almost like a biblical message, because my calling is virtually identical to the calling of Moses, who's my ancestor, and to, you know, as Elijah and Jeremiah. It's basically repent, get back connected with the Creator God. Don't set up a set of rules, i.e. stone commandments. Get people so their heart is, so they don't do things wrong because it's written on their heart. It's the message of, quote, the kingdom, which is, in other words, for mankind to be an advanced civilization with advanced technology that doesn't get absorbed by the technology like Ray Kurzweil and many, quote, Luciferians talk about. It is to transcend it spiritually so that technology is our servant and not our master.
Right.
Absolutely. Okay.
And that's what's happening is whether it's genetic technology that could relieve illness and stop many of the pains of fragility as people get older, and we want to lengthen human lifespan. I belong to the Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, but I don't want them to do things like create cybernetic, chimeric super soldiers that then become a plague upon the planet, or super weapons that are used to kill or destroy others so that you can get control. And so it could be used for good or incredible evil. And the problem is right now that most of the funding is toward evil.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
What's the outcome of this meeting that you've just been describing?
The outcome of the meeting was a somberness, a seriousness that if we didn't get the message through to the people that the planet of Earth would be annihilated, would be allowed to be annihilated. A lot of people think, for example, a lot of the space-based weapon platforms we have around the Earth, right, because I work with U.S. Space Command, are weapons to knock out spacecraft, to knock out asteroids or meteors, to basically shield Earth against geomagnetic superstorms that may occur from solar mass ejections and other things, and to control the climate. In other words, it's trying to create a kind of like a terrarium of Earth through as we pass through the galactic plane. And,
right, except that some of those weapons are located on the moon, aimed at Earth.
Right, and in fact, most of the weapons there can be aimed at Earth very easily, and have been used for great evil, just like the geotectonic weapon that triggered off the Sichuan earthquake, or the earthquake that was struck on Nagata, Japan, and broke the reactor core of the largest reactor in Japan, and it was told 3 days before to Ben Fulford, that the finance minister, of course, had been warned that they had to pass over authority to the Rothschilds of their banking system, where they were going to hit Nagata. And they did. I mean, that just shows you that the abuse of this power is not just under circumspection of human beings. If you want to invoke the biblical terms, if you want to call the word angel, just means Greek, means messenger. It means these messengers are always watching everything in the higher planes of existence, right? And they're here right now.
Absolutely.
They're here in this room right now.
I was going to say.
Right?
Yes.
They're here in this room right now.
So what do they want you to tell people that has to happen now? In other words, what?
Well, it's wrapped up in one word, and it sounds kind of trite, but it's true. It's called repent. Okay? And it says in the book of Malachi, which is one of the last books of the Old Testament, it says, repent before the great and terrible day. And what it's really saying is reconnect with the Creator God, become a child of God, take your scepter and have authority. You're no longer just a little bug down here, a worm on the planet Earth and a small dwarf, yellow dwarf star. You are the voice in this plane of existence of the Creator God. The spirit in you is not a separate spirit, it is the I am. Okay? You have the authority to create your own future. You have the authority to destroy disease and poverty, and not have pollution, and have limitless energy and information, and to spread peacefully and interact with other civilizations throughout the cosmos without disrupting or destroying them, but maybe being almost like in the, if you want to call it, midwives to other civilizations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That will then advance to the level where they all understand and come out of the petri dish and the crib of civilization and become another advanced culture themselves.
I'd like to add an anecdote to this, which you may have heard.
Right.
And I've also said before in another interview, but it's worth repeating. Bill Burns, the editor of UFO magazine, was privileged to talk with Admiral George Hoover
Right.
of the Office of Naval Intelligence before he died.
Right.
And he asked Admiral George Hoover, what's all this big secrecy about? What's the real deal? What's really going on here?
Right.
Because what's the big deal about Roswell and little guys from wherever they're from or whenever they're from?
Right.
Why can't we tell the people this? And the long story is that according to George Hoover, the biggest secret that the people must not realize, it's not this data about the technology or the visitors or the existence of the visitors. It's our own power. This is the biggest
It's
secret.
our own power, exactly.
It's our own power that we must not realize, because the greater secret is who we are, what we can do, what we can be, and they've got to keep us in our box. Otherwise, their game is over.
Right, well, that, in other words, the comments made by Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus, he says, surely you know you are gods. And they misinterpret the word. In other words, you don't replace the creator God of the universe. It means you're an extension of it.
Sure.
And you're only an extension when you hear the Hebrew word is shema, hear and do. In other words, the problem I see right now is that we have a society that thinks by external rules and controls we can create this Luciferian world of order and chaos so that they can create a world of, quote, peace, which is totally an ordered world that is completely under, you want to call it, scientific control. It's a scientifically controlled society, not ruled by spirit. The very nature of what we are, though, is a spirit being passing through a matrix of energy to create worlds. We are literally creating our own timeline in our name.
Yes.
And the thing is, corporately, we are creating our own timeline of names. That's why, for example, I tell people on the show repeatedly, don't drink the Kool-Aid of fear. Because fear itself creates if you want to call it background or an atmosphere that allows them to create the web of destruction that occurs next.
Yep.
In other words, they can think themselves into bombs going off in cities. They can think themselves into a release of plague. They can think themselves into a Great Depression where thousands of people starve to death and start cannibalizing. They can think themselves into one of the things they try to do is they want to have this hero worship, so they want to elevate you, so then you become almost like another avatar, rather than no different than them. I'm not any different than my little daughter, or the little, what they call them, the military when they're shooting them ragheads over in Iraq. I am the same. I'm just another incarnation of the I am.
Yep.
And the point has to be this, that if we don't start getting back to that connectedness, we'll think it's okay to have a thermonuclear scalar biological warfare. It's okay to kill most of the population of Earth. It's okay to create a new cybernetic super army and replace the military and destroy them, in fact, when we release these damn things.
Yep.
As I say, if one person said to me, if half of what you say is true, or even 10%,
Yeah.
we're in a lot of trouble.
Oh, we're in big trouble.
That I have a very special calling, not because I'm special, but because I hear and do the will. And people need to understand that this is not just, one of the things they try to do is they'll say if it's 10 years or a century or 1,000 years from now, they'll try to say, that guy was so special, nobody can ever be like him. And what I got to tell them is, I have had many opportunities to go to the dark side, and I could have been one of the greatest evildoers that ever lived on this planet.
And you were approached a couple of times, is that right?
Numerous times.
Numerous times.
The one of the most serious was 16 years ago, where I was sleeping in my home. I was actually back from working in Georgia at a burn unit and trauma unit and having practice there, and I'd come back for family reasons to Enfield, Nova Scotia. And I was sleeping in a different part of the house because I was snoring, so I woke up in the middle of the night, bolt upright, and I sat up, and I had all the lights on because I'd have to periodically go to the restroom or whatever. Had all the lights on, and this guy standing in front of me, about, what I call a $5,000 tuxedo, not a gray hair in his head, mid-50s, slim and trim. And I said, how did you get in here? And he says, it's wonderful to see you, my son. I said, you're not my father. And I looked at this guy, and he looked like French nobility, right? And I said, who are you? He says, I'm Godfrey, I'm the Baron Guy de Rothschild, the Pindar. And I had this really kind of what I call a check, or kind of a cringe in my spirit. I said, and I knew right away, because I had this gift, right, without getting into the big long discussion, and I knew right away, I said, I know who you are. you're the representative of the Luciferic power that controls Earth. He says, yes, I'm the CEO of Earth Inc. And I'm the man that sits in the 13th chair of the Druidic Council. I want you to be my understudy, and when I transcend, I want you to take over my job. And I said, no, I'm not going to. He said, we know your bloodlines, we know your genetics, we know everything about you, and you are a perfect replacement for me. I said, no. And he says, and after I rejected, he said, I'm going to kill you for writing these 2 books which I received supernaturally face down on the concrete, about 6 years before, which no one knew about because it was in my study.
What do you mean you received supernaturally face down on the concrete? What
Basically, I was out, if you want to call it, and I was told to write these books because and I wrote them down, which I released back in 1999 with a group called the Prophecy Club, and it said, and I'm going to touch your baby daughter's heart. I said, I don't have a daughter, and my wife's not pregnant, and he started laughing. And I said, I rebuke you because I serve the God of the universe, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And you could see his countenance change. He got really nasty looking. And all of a sudden he just went literally 4 feet as far as you're away from me, just in broad daylight, disappeared like in a vortex. And I went upstairs shaking and I could hardly talk, and I told my wife what happened. So the next morning I went to my office to do a pregnancy test, and of course she was pregnant. And like 6 weeks later, we're sitting in the ultrasound room, and during medical school I had worked with Dr. McMillan and actually did some of the background research on ultrasound before any of the doctors in North America actually had it for analysis, so I could read ultrasounds. So I'm sitting in the ultrasound room, the tech's moving over my wife's abdomen, and as she scans over the abdomen, the technician, you could tell her lips dried right up and she get this kind of stark look on her face. And I knew right away I could see nuchal thickening, and the center of my daughter's heart was gone.
Wow.
Okay?
And this is the young girl that we've just met?
Right. Now, yeah, you got to understand some of the things that have happened to me are so remarkable that they're just, she was born through C-section, and I was told supernaturally, I had visitations that told me that she wasn't going to die, and even though the surgeon said, we don't know why she's even born alive, because her heart was, literally the center of her heart was gone. She had like almost a single chamber heart, right? Which is a miracle. And they did the first surgery at 6.5 months. We knew, by the way, we're pro-life. We knew that she was going to be born with Down syndrome. And of course, we hoped that it was going to be somehow miraculously healed. But I was told that basically, that don't be fearful that she's going to survive and she's going to have this surgery. She had her first surgery. She had already lost 4 ounces from her birth weight to the time she had her first surgery. And then at 2.5 years, her heart started to enlarge again, and it was now the size of an adult heart, and she was about to die. So we had oxygen tanks, oxygen, one of those oxygen pumps, concentrating oxygen air, and had a 60-foot long tube going to her bedroom with a little mask before her surgery. And so I had because I have visitations all the time. They told me, this is the words the surgeons will say to you, that I don't know what I did, but I put in only 4 sutures, and her heart was miraculously healed. There's not even just a grade 1 mitral valve defect. They didn't have to replace the heart valves. But literally, with the Dacron grafts that they had done earlier, and just a few sutures, she's healed. She never had to be on a heart drug, never been in hospital, hasn't even ever had a cold, which is amazing for Down syndrome, right? But the key issue to me, and I think that I was permitted to go through these experiences, this is one of the many ones, is to understand the issue of the sacredness of all human life, whether it's the disabled, the elderly, people of different faiths, skin colors, intellectual powers, whatever, that we're all, in a sense, the continuous incarnation of the Creator God, which is the message of the kingdom that Yeshua Jesus was trying to give. The other experience that I want to share is back in October 10th of 1993, I was face down praying, and I was brought supernaturally by, if you want to call it the term archangel, which is one of the senior messengers, I was brought by this archangel, and he pronounced his name and said his name was Gabriel, right? And the word Gabriel means one who has a message from the voice of the Most High God. Gabriel means one who can speak for God, right? That's what it means. And he brought me to an underground facility, and he brought me to some satellite facilities. And we didn't just walk around and he kind of said, this is that and this is what's going to happen. He actually explained the technology to me in great detail. We spent, if you want to call it in the spirit realm, we spent hours and hours and hours with him. And I said, well, where am I? And he wouldn't tell me. He says, you're going to know because you're going to go to the place where this pastor is. And I thought it was Dallas, right? So I called up. No, he's already left here. He's gone to Colorado Springs. There was a pastor by the name of Pastor Dutch Sheets. So my wife called and she checked with a placement agency. Said, well, there's no jobs available in Colorado Springs. So 3 weeks later, she got prompted to go and start calling around. And the second hospital she called, she talked to a lady by the name of Joyce Wolf, who was the head of CCOM. And said, oh, we need an OCMED doctor. Your husband does occupational environmental medicine. He's a background, I was a charter member of Greenpeace and had a background in toxicology and chemistry and biochemistry. Oh, good, we'll fly you out this weekend. And 4 days later, I had the job. July 10th of the next summer, which is July 10th of 1994, I walked through the same facilities underground and the same satellite-based engineering stations and classified projects as I had with the Angel. Okay? That's just one of hundreds of experiences, okay? So people need to know that we are being watched. The reason why the Earth is not an engulfed mass of biological weapons release, even though we had 347 accidents just last year in Class 4 installations. That's not even FedEx couriers. We have no idea how many times we've been saved from cataclysm. We have no idea. The number of interventions is just, as I say, making angels gray-haired. And if you want to call them ETs, angels, whatever you want to do. But we are being watched, and we're being watched over very, very diligently because it's such a desperately late time.
But these guys, are you saying that they're not going to step in forever, or there's certain things they can't do?
No, they can step in only if there's a transformation of the heart. You see, it's not going to be space-based technology to knock out, to shield the Earth from the collapse of the magnetosphere. It's not going to be space-based particle weapons that can hit an oncoming meteor or a solar storm.
Right.
It's going to be a change in the heart of mankind, that we will not harm any other race. We will not invade a country like what we've done in Iraq and killed 1.5 million Iraqis. We will not put poison in vaccines and call it fine. We will not go to third world countries like Poland 2 months ago and do tests on Polish vagrants and kill. Out of 300 tested, 23 died within minutes, and 200 more were very seriously sickened. And they've now imported to America 500 million doses of the Sanofi Pasteur vaccine made on contract for Homeland Security. Now, it's not to scare people, it's to make them understand that the reality that I try to present on the show is both a technical, scientific, public information, as well as, in the public domain, as well as classified. But you'll see an overall picture, but then on the other side, there's this spiritual dimension to that. And they have to understand whether they're deciding, well, should I leave? I get people all the time, should I leave North America? Should I leave America? I said, no, now's the time for us to confront this because you can't go far enough away. And I said, well, what do you mean, how far? I said, well, Mars isn't far enough away for these guys. Right. I said, you have to understand, that, one of the talks that I had back in July of 1994 was, of course, the senior commander of U.S. Space Command comes up and he's, of course, very sharp, this is the way it is kind of a guy. He says, Docs, I come to Jesus talk for you. And I thought, oh, what is he going to say to us? And he had this real serious look. He says, you're one of our guys now. So you're going to hear stuff, because you're working with these guys working on all these weird projects. These guys are the brightest guys in engineering, cybernetics, physics, space-based weapons, everything. And you're going to get exposed to things. And so you won't hear from somebody else. I'm going to tell you right now, we control every cubic centimeter of space between here and Mars. And I said, what? I said, you mean between here and the moon? He said, no, Mars. We've had a colony on Mars since the early 1980s, and we found evidence of previous civilizations of human life on there going back a long time. We've had an entire city on the moon for mining operations for helium-3. We have entire fleets of space-based vehicles, and we have more advanced sub and above light vehicles that go interstellar. Okay? Right. You need to know that. You need to know we have entire rings of space-based platforms around Earth. We have collaboration with advanced civilizations, and if you don't know this stuff, might as well know it now, and if you have questions about anything, ask me, because otherwise, if you're not in the loop, you're going to freak out.
Okay, when was this? What year?
July 10th, 1994.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep. All of this is, let me start that sentence again. Nothing we know contradicts anything that you have just said.
Right.
Everything, the information that we've got from other sources completely supports everything you said.
Right.
This is just testimony for the people watching this,
Right,
in
so
case
you
anyone
know,
thinks,
And
this
I'm
is,
saying this straight up. I mean,
this is the way it is.
now,
for sure.
you got to understand that the number of convergences, when I traveled around to the Prophecy Club to 42 cities in Israel and I tell my story, people said 100 individuals couldn't have been in all those places, but I was supernaturally told, just like I was told to call you guys. I was the exit examining doctor for the special op forensic team that came back from the Murrah building in '95. And my boss, Major George Schwinder, was not available because he's getting extra airtime at Fort Hood, Texas. So all 5 special op agents, I had to examine. One of the 5 broke down and told me in great detail how they removed 2 unexploded 4th generation U.S. Army Corps engineered micronukes, thermate, RDX, and high explosive cord, and the buildings were brought down by the FBI and ATF. I kept that information hidden. And then as I was driving down the street in Littleton, Colorado, because I had my practice in downtown Denver, and I was living in Littleton, down in the Highlands Ranch.
And this is after?
This is back in 2003.
Okay.
I'm driving down the road, and because I do have this, gift, literally I hear the voice of God, just like
Right.
Moses. When it talks about in the Bible, I'm a bloodline descendant, okay? God said, turn on the radio, and I turn it on, and he said, turn to this channel. So I'm hearing this guy talk about financial things. I said, oh, that's boring. Why am I listening to this? And then all of a sudden, don't turn it off, and then the guy comes on, is Alex Jones. And Alex comes on and he started talking about this New World Order stuff. And I got this real kind of pinch in my spirit because I kept this information hidden since '95 to 2003 that I'm going to release this information. So I called into the show a couple times. I told him, I have information about Oklahoma City. And the guy that asked me to do a really extensive interview was a Pastor Butch Pa on Genesis Network. Well, after that, the network called me back and said, we want you to do a show. So in February of 2004, I started doing a radio show on Genesis. Now before that, I had done a kind of like an entertainment show called Laughter's the Best Medicine on Clear Channel. So I go there on Wednesday nights with Mark Allen Curry. We just have a fun time going down to the Clear Channel studios in Denver and just crack jokes back and forth and talk about wellness and toxicology and environmental medicine and anti-aging and things like that. Well, since that time, people need to understand, I've been in so many places at the wrong place at the wrong time. I was the doctor for the Englewood Fire Department and the ladder truck that was actually there on the scene, including a number of the other people there. So I know exactly what happened. It was a complete government op at Columbine. I was a doctor for the first kid shot in Columbine, and I had 1 pediatric patient, and he'd only started there working, going to school there because he had a special ed need, Mark Taylor, 3 weeks before, right? And when he came out of hospital after 2 14-hour procedures and 57 units of blood, his mother asked me to put my hands on him and pray for him. And I have a gift, an intuitive gift of discernment that's very unique. So I put my hands on him, and I knew right away, I said, you have an abscess in your chest that they missed, and I'm going to put you on this specific antibiotic, and in 3 days to the hour, you're going to call me in pain, and I'm going to put you in hospital and drain it. And to the hour, he called me, okay? And I put him in hospital, and I told the radiologist, I said, now when you go and do the CT scan, put this catheter into the abscess. He said, well, how do you know that? I said, well, when you do the CT, you're going to see the abscess. Put the catheter in, drain it, and call a thoracic surgeon, okay? So he did. He said, how do you know that? I said, it's a long story, okay? So without getting 3 weeks later, he's walking around with a PCA pump getting fentanyl. So you can press the pump every so many minutes, and the pump will then remember, so he can't press it too many times. He gets a little burst of fentanyl, and he's in agony. And this abscess is about the size of a fist. And thoracic surgeon's itching. He says, okay, well, we're going to have to cut this out, because if you don't, he's going to probably, the abscess will expand, or it'll go septic, and he'll die. So he told Mark, he said, he's 16 and a half, he's not really bright. His mother's kind of emotionally a basket case. And he said, well, I want, they're quote, believers, Christians. But a lot of them don't believe in miracles. They don't believe that we have the authority to take authority over reality, whether it's our physical bodies or whatever. So I said, look, Mark, I'm going to pray for you. I said, and tomorrow morning, instead of you going for surgery, you're going to walk out of here. And of course, he looked at me like, whoa, that's a pretty bold thing to say. So I stayed up all night, and I prayed for him. Next morning, I came in about 7:15, and I just put my hand out. I said, God, you saved this kid from 7 bullets to the chest, right, and 1 through the arm and leg. And the bullets actually went behind his heart and in front of his aorta. Yeah. One hit the T9 vertebrae and knocked a fragment off. Yeah. And I said, you're going to, I said, and I to is the way I talked to God. I said, you're going to heal him immediately, and you're going to transform his body so he'll be a witness, because you didn't allow him to survive this without being able to tell the truth of what happened in Columbine. So I put my hand on him, and it was like holding a high-tension power line. All of a sudden, it just felt like this energy coming right through me. And I could see, literally with the mind's eye, if you want to call it the creator, I could see right down to his cells and everything, and it was gone. I said, Mark, get your clothes ready. We're walking out of here.
Wow. Yeah.
And I walked up to the front desk of the nurse, and I said, he's not going to surgery for a 7-hour procedure to cut out 4 ribs and take out this abscess. He's coming home. So they looked at me like, uh-oh, this guy's a nutcase. How can we get psychiatry down here? Right? I said, no, repeat the CT scan. It's gone. So they repeated the CT scan, and an hour and a half later, he was hopping and skipping out of the hospital.
Fabulous.
Okay,
Right?
Now,
isn't there
this
some
is-
disinfo on the web about this boy and his mother in regard to you?
Oh, well, what happened is that they get involved with, the mother has a problem. She's manic depressive. And they offered all kinds of big movie scripts and money and everything. And Mark actually right now just got a contact from her doctor just last week, because I'm trying to help. The doctor called me all the way from Iowa saying, please, you're one of the few people that care for Mark, and I still do, and I care for his mom too, but they said a lot of nasty things because they got involved with some pastors, and they said some, and they got a big, a possibility of a movie contract. And what was happening is I was working and my wife were working on collecting a ton of information, because we were going to private showings of videotape that the public didn't see. I had got a chance to interview and talk to almost every other child that survived Columbine shooting. So there were many of the kids that actually died of SWAT team bullets. There were at least probably, we think, up to 4 kids that may have died from SWAT team bullets from the forensics. And Mark literally stayed and lived with us for almost a year and a half. He went to vacation with us even to Las Vegas, right? And even when they asked me to go out in January of 2000 to speak at the Full Gospel Fellowship, I paid my own ticket. We didn't ask for anything. So, but what happened is the mother had been contacted by a big movie company wanting to turn this into a Columbine movie. And they got real angry that we wouldn't just hand everything over or do things their way. I said, no, we're not going to turn this into a sideshow here. This is real serious. We have this kid survive. We have this miraculous thing happen. We don't want this to turn into a sideshow. And that's where the negativity started. But
now,
it's really unfortunate that happened, because Mark is still, he's very sick right now. He's been in a psychiatric facility. His doctor, one of his doctors in Iowa, contacted me, what can we do to try to help him? I said, well, he needs serious help, but a lot of the time they give these young people drugs that I think are patently toxic.
Yeah.
We know, for example, when you give somebody that's manic depressive, SSRI drugs like Luvox, Prozac, etc., they go over the deep end. Unfortunately, his doctors gave him the wrong drug. Okay. And these drugs came out of Hoffmann-La Roche. They came out of mind control projects in the Soviet Union and Germany, going right back to A.G. Farben. They go right back to G proteins, and he had a real bad reaction from whatever they gave him.
Yeah.
And
now, if I can
so
steer this back now,
yeah.
because what that was a beautiful story, and it's great to have that on
Right, but
record,
people need to also
about how
know-
you were in the right place at the right time so many times that most people would never believe it.
Right.
But backed up from that, you've been in the right place at the right time for a reason here, and that is to give what you would probably call your testimony.
Well,
to
you
the
got to be a
people.
witness. I'm almost like Daniel in the lion's
Yeah.
den. Yeah,
So-
so I've been in places that most people can't even imagine. Like in 1977, I was supposed to do research on MS at the Santa Monica VA Hospital, part of UCLA. And one of the projects was to work on a PhD neurology residency under Dr. Wallace Tortolot. And the other 4 projects were all classified. 4 of them were actually cybernetic projects. One was actually a helmet that would convert thoughts directly to on-flight commands directly to a supercomputer that they already had, with command or symbols that would be projected onto the canopy of the jet, so you could fly the jet by thought, fire off ordnances. And the other 3 projects were to take prisoners from West Orange and Irvine state penitentiaries and wet wire their brains with platinum and palladium micro wires. And Dr. Tortolot had a custom-made CT implanter that was used where the CT scan could implant micro wires and specific nuclei in the brains to actually use supercomputers that were classified to convert neural net stochastic firing sequences into particular images, so you can control their behavior, see what they see, hear what they hear. And I turned it down. I said, no, you people are crazy. Because
Okay, to turn those,
No.
to turn them into Manchurian Candida.
Yeah, they actually had a thing called the Rambo chip that they had back in the 60s, and they're actually, this is part of Delgado's research at Yale. they had a thing called a Rambo chip, and what the Rambo chip was a rage control chip that was in the subthalamic nucleus that could actually control rage. So you flip the switch and they would kill, and you just flip it, turn it off, and they'd stop. So this is one of the things that the residents were laughing at. Ha ha ha, we can do this stuff. I think that sounds pretty ghoulish. And people don't understand that a lot of the people that they get into these projects have 180 plus IQs, but they're twisted.
Yeah.
Okay, or if they're not, they're compromised, and if they eventually discover it and they try to pull back, they do things like patch them. Have you ever heard of what a patch is?
I'm not sure.
Okay, a patch is where they give you an intravenous patch. Okay. And the patch lasts 3 days. Okay, and or transdermal patch, and if you don't get the next patch in 3 days, you die a horrific death. Okay, so they get you on a short string.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Now,
so
some of this is on record on the Granada Forum lecture, and a lot of people watching this will already be familiar with that material.
Right.
We're nearly 2 years further on from there. Where are we now?
Well,
what does this mean for the human race and for the individuals watching this now?
Well, the timeline to watch for is actually the nation of Israel. Okay. And the timeline to watch is, and that's why my calling is particularly important, because I'm going to re-release my book Clay and Iron here sometime in the not too distant future, right?
Okay.
So if you look at the nation of Israel, and there's so much consternation, all the stuff with Iran is all over Israel. Okay.
Yep.
Even American foreign policy, the reason why they went into Iraq was Israel. $1 trillion spent, the collapse of the economy, it's all tied back to Israel. Okay. And people say, well, why is Israel so important? Why was there a first Holocaust? Why is there planning to be a second? And it's really pretty simple. Think of it this way, is the creator of the universe made a people, a group of people, a mixed, if you can call a mixed group of people, the ancient tribes of Israel, an object lesson to the world. A scapegoat, in a sense. A way of explaining to people, if you try to follow the law, you'll get condemned and destroyed. Okay? And what would happen is that the original books of the Bible spoke about a God you could not see, that was the creator that created you in his image. Okay? And even if they didn't understand it, they tried to adhere to it. They kept every jot and tittle. Right? And so the people of the book, which is what they used to be called, they weren't called the Jews or the Israelites, that they had to be wiped out, because they would tell people, even if they went off and they went through a reformation or they learned from other religious groups, whether it's Buddhists or Hopi or natives, they'd eventually start getting beyond religion. As I said in my talk on the Granada Forum, 10,000 years from now, will there be anything called religion? Of course not. It won't exist, because they'll have a full knowledge of the Creator God and what they are. Because we can't exist and transcend beyond our technology unless we do that. We won't survive.
Right, but people...
In other words, the two are mutually exclusive.
But to get back to what the role is of Israel.
The role of Israel is a timepiece. It's actually a detonator. It's a transformative event. It's like the ultimate, if you want to call it, death trap for civilization. So what's happened, for example, I've had on my show numerous times Barry Chamish. And a good example is the nation of Israel arose, and the Holocaust, the greatest lies in modern history have been about the Holocaust. Yes, they killed almost 7 million Jews. Yes, they killed probably a number of others, up to maybe 23 million. But the real goal was not only a ritual sacrifice to the transdimensional demonic realm, right? But the real goal transcends that. It was to wipe out the idea of a creator God and that we're an incarnation of the creator. Because eventually, if the Reformation and all these other things were to continue to proceed since the breakup of the control of the Roman Catholic Church, and then all the spin-offs and everybody trying to get into New Age and all the other religious things where there's a return to spirituality, the big move right now is not toward religion, it's toward spirituality. Whether they're coming from a Christian viewpoint, a Jewish viewpoint, a Buddhist viewpoint, and they're all starting to kind of compare notes and realizing even though they use different terms, they're starting to understand there's a commonality there.
Sure.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Okay, but still, to steer you back, so Israel, the role of Israel at this time,
The role of Israel
on
is-
stage, what is exactly?
Well, the role of Israel is
there's
to
going
be well, the role of Israel is primarily to act on the, if you want to call it the Luciferian serpentine side, is to act as a detonator for the final annihilation of mankind.
So in
meaning
practical...
they're going to
They use it as a final fulcrum
attack
point.
Iran and in return There's gonna
Well,
be
this will set.
retaliation,
Well, this will
da, da,
set. Yeah. Well, or the threat of an attack will set in motion the peace treaty that'll partition the state of Israel. Well, just think of it this way logically. If you're from another world and you were to see a nation that's the size of, a little tiny strip of land from anywhere from 10 to 16 miles long, the third nuclear power, probably the most advanced in terms of biological weapons on the planet, is the state of Israel. Right. They're number one.
Okay.
They have their own space-based imaging systems, ImageSat. They've got all kinds of weapons when they were kind of on the outs that they developed with the South Africans. They even a lot of time buy their own jets and just stack them right up. They have the number one air force on the planet in terms of rapid response and killing capacity. Number one, not number two or three. What happens when you divide that nation, have no boundary zone where they can protect themselves? The only thing they can do is pull the Samson option and hit the button to have space-based platforms, because Israel has them. Israel has space-based weapons platforms, imaging systems, terrible stuff. They could wipe out every city within 10,000 miles of them. They can just, bam, they're gone.
But
So
what is the plan?
the plan is it's all being set up because you see the leaders of Israel are satanic Luciferian. The entire state of Israel was set up, as Barry Chalmers has said, so they could cleanse themselves of any who is a quote a Torah Jew. Anyone who understand the nature of the Creator God. Even if they didn't understand the depths of it, they didn't want anybody to understand that they were created in the image of God and their spirit having a physical existence on this plane of existence. They wanted to then replace them with a Luciferic idea, an agnostic idea, a communist idea. So the state of Israel was originally sponsored with the Soviet, the actual communist Soviet, okay? And their idea was to create an agnostic Luciferian society where they follow the highest tenets of Babylonian Kabbalah, which means that they themselves are God. Okay? In other words, they replace God because therefore they are the energetic intelligence force that's willing to use good or evil, following Shabbatait's V, the false anti-messiah of 1666, and Jacob Frank, to actually create a world order where, quote, these Luciferic Kabbalists would control the world. And that's what's happening now. You can see it with the financial system, you see it with the political system, you can see with everything, that these Luciferic Satanists, the two groups at the very top are Teutonic Knights that think they're bloodline descendants through Yeshua HaMashiach Jesus and King David. That's one group, where they're all the royals of Europe, and the other group are the Sabbatean, Luciferic, satanic Jews.
Okay.
Okay?
One
Those
group
people
is
run the world.
Led
okay?
by the Pope, right?
Led by the Pope and the Black Pope and the Knights of Malta, and they're totally controlling it, and they're interacting at such a level that they literally have physical presence of these demonic reptilian beings right even in the Vatican.
Yep.
Right in, and people need to understand when you get these deepest underground bases. And I had one Canadian engineer who actually controls and engineers and takes care of the Aurora Space Fleet to fly out of our underground bases in central Germany in the Black Forest and fly to our moon bases and onto Mars. And he's terrified to come on the show, and I've been talking to him for the last couple of years. But he's shown me enough technical information and facts and sent me stuff that I know that his story is real, right? So I'm going to repeat it. After 10 months of psychological testing, they finally said, well, now you're in the deepest of these dumb one bases, and we're going to bring you down to the final level. And he gets down there, and all these beings are right there in the flesh, okay? Just like that of Star Wars, okay? It's really crazy, but he said it's real. And he said, why won't you come on and tell us? Because he said, I don't want to shatter people's religious beliefs. I said, well, I do want to shatter them, because it's a sacred cow, and in fact, their religion, whether they're this group of Christians or this group of Jews or this group of Buddhists, they're all wrong. They're all wrong. In other words, I call it real lies going on. It doesn't mean you throw the baby with the bathwater like Bill Maher in his movie that's coming out this week called Religious, where he says anybody who's religious is a fool. They're an idiot. Because of all the foolishness that religions are doing, like I call them the Armageddonites that are supposedly Christians that believe that they have to bathe the world in blood and fire.
Right.
Or the Sabbateans that think, well, we'll just pull the Samson option and go down to their underground bases because they got a ton of them down there. Or the Illuminists who think, well, who cares if we blow up the world? We'll just go to our underground bases and we'll survive. And then we'll come back up a decade or a century like the Morlocks of the time, the movie H.G. Wells' Time Machine. And it's insanity because they're not going to survive what's going to come. They're not going to survive it, okay? And they need to grasp that what we're heading for here is, unless they take up the scepter of what they are and the power that they have to decide for life, just like Moses when he took the 6 tribes of in Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, he put between the Mount of cursings and the Mount of blessings. He said, today choose life. In other words, he's not taking away their choice. He's saying, you need to grow up. You need to stop talking about easy believism, prosperity gospel, all this other foolishness, and you need to start talking about relating to other humans. You can't fund a country on a credit note to go and kill 1.5 million Iraqis. You cannot decide to invade Iran when we know that if they hit the Bashar reactor and 450 targets. I got my military contacts inside there and experts that have told me in the last 4 to 6 weeks that it'll kill between 1.5 to 15 million in the first 2 weeks, and it could be as high as 32 billion plus, and the radiation cloud will go downwind and move directly through Yemen all the way through to Saudi Arabia and heading down toward China and Japan.
And that's after an Israeli strike?
Right.
Is that what they're
well,
telling
what
you?
happens is if they start, they have to, the Americans are already pre-positioned there.
Okay. But
So the thing is, what this will do,
So how can this be prevented?
it can be presented, well, the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to try to bring us to the brink of destruction and then start a peace treaty to divide the land. And and what happened is Omer has already promised that he's going to let this go through within 12 months of him leaving before the government transitions to the next prime minister, which means we have a time window of probably 11 months now where they're going to actually put in the final treaty to divide the city of Jerusalem and divide the state of Israel. That's setting the detonator. You can't do that. If you do that, you guarantee a thermonuclear war, chemical, biological, scalar war that's going to end civilization on this planet. You cannot divide the land of the state of Israel. You have to have an inclusive government that can include Arabs and Christians and Jews and people from Baha'i and whatever, and Palestinians, and you have to not make them feel like third world citizens, or that if they intermarry, you know, or whatever, or if they evangelize, they're going to end up in jail or whatever. In other words, you have to have dialogue between people, and not have a apartheid, which is what they have there.
Yeah. I haven't understood you there personally. If you're saying that the state of Israel becomes divided, what's the connection between that and the inevitability of a huge war?
Because Israel will be pushed to the point when the conflict reaches its culmination that it will start the trigger for a thermonuclear conflict.
Between who?
Between all of these great nations. It's a bipolar world. We have right now the Western alliance of the Illuminati with, you know, Britain and America and all of their allies. And on the other side, we have the Shanghai Cooperation Group with Russia, China, and all of their sphere of influence. So it's not a unipolar world, it's a bipolar world, okay? And people need to know this. One of the things that happened back in the spring of 1999, I was taken supernaturally actually through the ground and saw the geological formations and the oil at the southwest end of the Dead Sea. And there's a lot of oil there. 27.2 trillion barrels, and it's renewable, okay? And it's from the fault line that runs all the way from Turkey right through to Kenya to Lake Victoria, okay? And the Dead Sea itself was created when the oil came up, the magma actually, from the oil field, magma hit along that fault line when the earth shifted back at the time of Abraham. It actually hit that fault line and caused an explosion equal to 500,000 Nagasaki's. The guy that told me that was the head of the Israeli oil company. Okay, FICO, who discovered all the oil fields in Zohar, all the oil fields down in the Sinai Peninsula. Hi, Kelsey.
They're actually not using that oil, right?
They've actually, afterwards, I was asked to go over there when I, you know, gave this in one of my presentations on the radio show with Stan Johnson by Hayseed Stevens and the Israeli Oil Company and Ariel Sharon. I was actually asked to go to Israel and say a prayer at the southwest end of the Dead Sea at the bottom of Mount Sodom, which I did on Rosh Hashanah, right at sundown, and blow the shofar and actually say this Hebrew prayer. And I did that, and I warned them. I said, no, I'm a prophet, and I'm telling you, if you try to expose to the world that this oil is here, you're going to precipitate an immediate war. You're going to have millions of people coming in here, because there's more oil there than the whole world put together. Right?
Okay, but you're exposing that right now.
I'm exposing it now because it has to be exposed. Okay. It's a time now to expose it, because what's going on now is basically there's a number of things in motion now that probably in less than a year they're going to sign the final treaty. If they sign that treaty, and it's also tied to other events happening around 2012, because as we pass through the center point of the galactic plane, there's a great danger that we're going to have geomagnetic collapse of the magnetic field around the Earth. We're also going to have very, very high risk in the next several years of major solar mass ejections that trigger off super earthquakes and super tsunamis. Very, very high risk of that, okay?
Right.
Yeah. We've been told this independently.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, so people need to know that, things that happen on the spiritual level also descend and have effects on the energetic and the physical level. And as we get into wrong timelines and make wrong decisions corporately, we move along those timelines towards things that can be very destructive. So what I tell people right now is not the time to flee, but there's going to be incredible pain because they're moving toward the Amero. I've already talked to people very reliable. They've already seen the Amero notes in Mexico City.
So you're here in Oceanside, California, right?
Because I was told to be here.
And why? Could you?
I know partially why. The way it happened is back in February, my wife is very intuitive too. She told me, he said, Bill, we're supposed to move. I said, well, I don't want to move. I'm comfortable. So I didn't really want to move from Denver to go back home, but I was with my mom before she died in October a year ago. And so I went to sleep that night and I said, God, tell me why. And he did. He sent me the angel, and the angel told me, you're going to go to Oceanside Vista. I said, I don't want to go there. I don't even know anybody there. There's not even any jobs there or anything that I want to do there. Right? He said, and he started laughing at me, right? And cracking jokes, and because people need to know that they're watching us and they know the future that we don't know, right? And a lot of times we probably wouldn't do things that we want to do because some of the stuff we have to do is pretty painful and messy.
So what's going down that brings you here?
Well, part of it is being here now so you could even do this taping.
Okay.
Because there's people here that have to wake up, that are going to have to hear this message to know that I'm called to actually call it what's called the sons and daughters of the Most High God. I'm one to call the witnesses. Now, I'm going to back this up a bit so you'll get an understanding of just how important this meeting is tonight. In the first century, my family were in this 24 family cycle of the Kohanim that actually served in the temple at the time of Yeshua. And a prophecy was given directly by Emmanuel, directly to my ancestor, that was written down in the first century and passed on all the way through to my great uncle Michael, who died in the 70s. That was supposed to be given to me because I was the eldest of the eldest. His brother thought he was the one called to give this word, which is to blow the trumpet of Elijah and actually tell people about the coming new age, the new world that was going to come, a world of peace where there wouldn't be lack or all these things. And that was passed down for almost 19 centuries, right? That person is me, okay? And the reason why I know that is because at 8.5, when I had my tonsil surgery done, I had a French surgeon who was operating on the Colchester County Hospital. They cut an artery in my neck and I bled to death, okay? It was a little guillotine style thing where they pulled the tonsil through with tongs, cut it off, and I had an aberrant artery and I bled to death. And I went down the tunnel of light, and of course, the way it happened is all of a sudden I'm floating over the operating room table, I'm looking down, I can see this little boy, and I see blood spurting everywhere, and I'm thinking, gee, that looks like me, and I didn't feel any pain. And then all of a sudden I'm standing there, and I'm walking around trying to talk to the nurses and doctors, and nobody would pay attention to me. So I'm getting very frustrated. So I walked toward the door. As I walked toward the door, I just went right through it. So I turned right, and I walked down the hall, and I saw the nursery, and I saw these babies all bound up tight in their side, and the nurses were trying to keep them real, because they all start to cry. And they all had little different colored blankets on them. So one baby started to cry, and they all started to cry, and all of a sudden, everything started to fade into inky black, a black so black, you could feel it. And I felt like I was being squinched through a pinhole, right? And then all of a sudden, I cried out, God, where am I? Something terrible's happening, right? And I saw a pinpoint of light, and all of a sudden, there was these intersecting crimson lines. And I'm going down this tunnel light, and I said, it's too fast, God, too fast. And then all of a sudden, I'm in this place of light, and across on the other side of this space, there's a man standing there, almost glowing light, and he had a broad golden sash with a double-corded belt, and his, I call brass-like sandals. And his forehead was kind of, it almost looked like there were puncture marks, and it was still swollen, and you could see where his beard was plucked out. He had reddish hair, just like the best way to describe him would be a Norwegian, only an olive-colored skin. He looked like a big, rock-hard, kind of 3% body mass kind of carpenter with big hands and big knuckles. And he looked like a guy that could, make anything, right? Only it fell to the middle part of his arm and leg. And as he appeared, there was a big chasm appeared in these clouds because it was all light all around. And I saw this little wooden bridge, and he said, don't cross the wooden bridge or the silver cord will break. And I said, what's that? And he says, I will bring it into your remembrance. Because in other words, because you know everything. You just have to remember it. I remember going down the tunnel of light. I can remember this cord that seemed to come out from the base of my brain and my throat, and it went down. It was like a cord of water. He called it a cord of living waters. It was like a neon cord that kind of scintillated with light, right? And he said, if you go, you won't be able to return. I said, where am I? He said, you're at the gates of paradise or heaven, the eternal now, where there is no past, no present or future, but everything that you think immediately is, right? So I said, well, can you show me? So all of a sudden he's holding me by his right hand, and I'm flying over the Golden City, and I can see everything. And I would say, because there's no time space, he showed me worlds, beings, planets, civilizations that I'm going to talk about a little bit today, but literally the amount of things he showed me about the universe is an elemental particle in a yet larger universe. He told me about time space, he told me about quantum physics, he told me everything. That's why I was about to go into nuclear physics at MIT. Okay?
Yep.
He showed me beings that, later on in life I heard, I saw that in Star Wars, okay? Because these things did exist. I saw them. I was there to their worlds. I can't tell you how long it was, but in lineal time it had to be many centuries that I spent there. It wasn't a matter of a few minutes like some people have these near-death experiences. I was there for an indeterminate period of time that was so long. The amount of things, and I only talk about a very tiny portion of what I know because it's so beyond the pale of human understanding of civilizations and worlds and things that people cannot even grasp. So I don't talk about it.
Okay,
So all of a sudden,
you went to this place.
So after I'm back, now all of a sudden he's back on his side, now I'm back on my side. I'm thinking, okay, after this indeterminate time, I'm back on my side. And I said, well. And then he spoke to me telepathically. He didn't have to speak. And I said, well, what is your decision? And I said, I want to do the right thing. And I said, well, if I'm going to go back, what am I to do? And all of a sudden, he's holding me with his hand again. I'm giddy. I'm looking, we must be about 400 miles above the earth. And I look down. This time, he had on a tallis. And I never didn't know what a tallis was because I was raised a little Roman Catholic boy, right? So I saw this tallis, and it was splattered with blood on it. And this tallis, which is a prayer shawl. And and I looked down over the earth, and I could see the edge of the horizon shimmering across the dark of space. And he said, behold my blue jewel, the earth, right? And I said, it's alive. He says, yes, right? In other words, the earth is a living thing, right?
Sure.
Right? I said, and I heard a voice behind me that said, it sounded like a deep voice of one of the, called the angelic. And he says, behold the voice of the seven thunders. So the first time he said, behold, and he held his hand like this, and I don't know what that symbol means, but he held his index and his middle finger and pointed down toward the earth, and he said, behold, and all of a sudden I saw fireballs rising off the earth everywhere, but particularly across continental America. A lot of them. And I thought, oh, this is a light show. I mean, this is great. I'm a little kid here. I'm still in my little hospital gown from having my surgery, and I'm here floating up in space, and I'm looking down over, and I see all these fireballs. And then he looked back at me sternly like, you don't get it. The important part is our civilization has been conceived almost like in a spiritual womb, Earth. And the timeline that we are selecting corporately will decide whether or not we're stillborn or aborted, or whether our civilization will move on to join the Beni Elohim, the Council of the Eschaton, the advanced civilizations that are literally the incarnation of the creator of the universe. In whatever form, whether they're human, non-human, other civilizations. Because at some point, we're going to, quote, have contact. Well, how do we have contact? What I'm presenting is that this is the transition point from, quote, the past, which is religion, which is based on ignorance. Like the Buddhists try to say, a lot of people say I'm a Buddhist, but I'm not, is that all pain and suffering is due to ignorance. The real problem is that in a future where we have a total understanding of ourselves and the nature of the universe, there's not even room for religion, because religion is like recipe cards. It's irrelevant. It's like, this is my past history, these are my recipe cards. It's dogma. It's replacing an ever-present knowledge of what is right or wrong. And you don't need to be told.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
So
let's get
the
back
key why Israel is so important is because Israel is an object lesson for the whole planet. Israel is, if you want to call it, it purposely set up to be the nexus decision point of civilization.
Okay.
And how that is handled determines whether or not our civilization moves forward. If you look at America right now, the $1 trillion debt of these wars in the last years since 9/11, the people who put the bombs in the building were under orders from Project Omega, which is the overseeing agency of all of the secret agencies on the planet.
Run by the Vatican.
The ones who put the bombs in the building were contracted. They could have been any secret agency, but they happened to be very experienced Israeli Mossad nuclear agents to put the nuclear bombs in the World Trade Center. Okay? Now they do that because they want to have a hatred of Jewish people. And I'm not an anti-Semite. I have Jewish blood, Iranian blood, Median blood, etc. So I have...
Why would the Mossad want hatred of Jewish people?
part of their dialectic of control. Just like the death of millions of Jews in the Second World War was actually at the hands of not only the Sabbateans, who want to cleanse the whole, if you want to call it the whole people of Israel, of anyone who could have any religious Torah belief in the Creator God. So they had an anti-Messiah, an anti-God, a we are God. The real purpose of the Kabbalah, if you want the highest levels, which is the highest level of all Masonry, is Kabbalah, right? Is that we are, the revelation is you are the Luciferic satanic power. You don't need to go to a higher God, you are God. Right?
Okay, now,
which is very different, right?
If this is all about Israel being an example, right in the center stage,
right.
Okay, for everyone to look at and everyone to learn from with all kinds of things at stake, what can the ordinary person do to influence these choreographed events? The people watching this, who are even very aware, very well informed, some of the most aware, most informed people around, well, they'll be saying, well, what can I do? This is all being set in train.
The real issue, it comes out of one real simple thing. It comes out with what are they going to do personally to come out of religion? Okay? Religion is the toxic poison of the modern world. And people say, well, we are talking in terms of spirituality like a prophet, like Israel, but people understand Yeshua himself, Jesus, was not religious.
Of course.
He was a spiritual leader.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay? He was leading people away from religion to relationship.
Yeah.
Okay? And any of the great leaders, even if they only had a tiny portion of that, tried to teach similar pieces of it. You know, whether you're talking about, you know, prophets or people who were spiritual leaders, that were the native peoples or in China or elsewhere, you're talking about, they all basically had a portion of that truth. The greatest portion that was ever released was the fullness of the Father in the flesh, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus, which is why the whole of the Old Testament and New all point back toward him, because he was a great teacher. Now, what's happening in our world right now is that everything happening in our world was financial collapse, control matrix, technologies, everything is all centered around Israel. Everything. Okay? In fact, the two great empires of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Western Empire are all meeting there, and the goal of the Teutonic Knights, which are the Knights of Malta, is to have a great temple there where they can set up the world government from their temple. Weird, hey? But it's happening because it's happening in the spiritual realm above, and as above below, it's also descending and happening in the physical realm, because we have to answer this question correctly, which is to transcend technology, we need to transcend religion to spiritual relationship. And we need to understand that when God is speaking, whether it's through the ancient peoples of Israel or the Hopi Indians or whatever, he's speaking to them, and they only have their portion. They have to understand God is speaking a language of history, a language of to their spirits, a language of knowing things, or if they do not transcend spiritually, they're going to die together.
So what these people can do that are listening to this is basically reconnect with the Creator.
And also stop buying into the Armageddonite idea. We're going to have a rapture. We have to be bathed with fire. The Luciferic idea is somehow that I can decide what is good or evil. That is the foolishness of the, quote, the super scientists, the technician, the Illuminati, the people in these black op projects that think that they can decide for the rest of the planet. And surely we're deciding because we're building underground bases so we'll survive going through the galactic plane. They're not going to survive because I can guarantee you that the council will not allow them to survive no matter what they do if there's not a transition of their heart. It's the exact same message as Yeshua HaMashiach gave, which is, unless your hearts are changed, your world will die.
Yes.
Okay?
And that's what's at stake.
That's what's at stake.
Now.
And we're talking about not just the death of a person, I call it omnicide, not just the death of a family, not just the death of a nation, not just the death of mankind or every living thing, but the death of the spiritual entities that are incarnated into the beings here in this world. It's literally a spiritual abortion that's being done on the planet. And if you see the transdimensionals, the satanic Luciferic transdimensionals have harassed and intervened and abducted. And I mean, people say, well, why do the abduction phenomena seem so malicious? It's because they're demonic. I mean, you might use the term demonic from the Bible, but in every culture you'll find these things going on, and they're intensifying, including, you know, not only our vehicles up there, like the TR-3, which is these giant triangles, and the Aurora and other ones, but there's a ton of these other vehicles because they're here watching for the show. They're here for the show. They're here in the birthing room, ready to see if there's going to be a delivery or an abortion of the planet. Okay? That's what's going on.
Yes.
Okay? And they need to grasp it. It's not going to happen by a change in politics or president or monetary policy. it's going to happen with a change of the heart. For example, give me one example of solution. Why do we have a world that can allow usury, which is interest? Why do we allow derivatives? Why can we allow a group of people to control and manipulate money that can cause us starvation, where 60% of the cost of food is due to manipulation, and then they make bad policies suppressing energy technologies so that people literally can't truck the food in third world countries, so they can't make themselves independent and they starve to death. Or in places like in North Korea, we demonize people so that they then literally exhume their own dead and eat them, which is what they've had to do. Okay? And people do not know the depth of how far this is going to go unless there's a transformation of the heart. It has to happen immediately. And I'm called as a witness of Ephraim, and I call out today to a witness of Yehuda. Okay? The Jews now and the Jewish people are by and large mostly agnostic, or what I call, they belong to synagogues, or basically either spiritually dead because they don't connect with the true reality of this. The very tiny fraction of real Torah Jews who understand what's going on, and there are some there who are rabbis who know what's going on, are fearful because they see the coming second Holocaust. And I went through Yad Vashem. It's not just a Holocaust of the death of the last of the Jews. It's the death of all humanity. It's coming. And then they're conspiring this through their transdimensionals, the serpentine, you know, these civilizations out there that are hell-bent on destroying mankind. They're conspiring with these world leaders who are literally their minions. Yeah. George Bush Sr. and George Soros and the Blackstone Group and all these other organizations are just their minions. And many of them think, oh, I'm going to get life extension technology, I'm going to survive whatever's coming, I'm going to get a 50,000 acre farm in Paraguay. Lies. Or I'm going to survive in these underground places when you hit a force 11 or 12 earthquake, it'll shatter all their tunnels. No, they're not. They're going to be entombed into those places.
It's a good message to give the guys from the Black Ops who will be watching this.
Right. They need to understand that I've walked, they can't stop me. I can instantly walk in the spirit to any of their places without any way of stopping me. Okay? We are the sons of the Most High God. Now, it's not just me, it's all of us, and daughters of the Most High God. We need to start taking our authority back, because agnosticism, atheism, is just another form of Luciferianism. It is, I am God, I can decide what's good or evil. And we need to get away from all religions and enter back into spirituality with the Creator. We need to fall down on our face and say, yes, I am here because I signed up for this.
Now, here's a question. This will probably be watched by a few tens of thousands of people.
Right.
A few tens of thousands of wonderful people, and every single one of those people is critically important here. But is that enough? It's a tiny fraction of humanity.
The answer, the real issue, and it's almost exactly like the message that was given by Yeshua, Jesus. His message, he had a message that was given to the general. Just like when I do my regular radio show where I talk about, hey, don't vaccinate your child. These vaccines have been determined by globalists that want to poison your children with vaccines, and I show them the technical truth. But it's harder for them to accept the fact that the vaccines, like in sub-Saharan Africa, had plasmids to destroy and cause infertility, or the Gardasil vaccine now. I got contacted by Desiree Rover just Friday night, who has a radio show in the Netherlands, who used my material and many others to kind of reference in her radio show to tell people, hey, this is a policy by globalists to sterilize little girls and destroy their health, right? And they're testing vaccines on populations. They have no idea what they're signing up for. And some of them get multiple vaccines and they're malnourished, and it destroys their health and kills them. Many of them die.
Yes.
It's very hard for them to conceive that and then to go to the next stage. If they listen to all my shows and they listen to this message, I've released 3 chapters of the scroll, and there's 12 chapters altogether. The first chapter I released in 1999, which is a warning against America, which I delivered in 42 cities in Israel. The second chapter of the scroll I released in 2005 at Pastor Butch Paz conference, and the third chapter of the scroll, which is tied to my talk at ConspiracyCon 2008, I released this May. I didn't get a chance to read the scroll, but if you go to Clay and Iron, you can pull up those PowerPoints and those scrolls, and I'm going to have that as well as what's called the Prayer of the 12 Stones. People need to grasp this in their spirit. It needs to ring the bell, just like when you go to a Buddhist temple and you can feel the vibration of the truth. If something's spoken truth, what we're speaking tonight is not just wisdom and not just knowledge, it's what I call spirit words. It's words that need to ring their spirit, no matter what religious background or lack of it, to know how desperately bad the times are. We're not just looking at a depression here, we're looking at the prelude to a financial collapse that's a prelude to a false peace treaty that is the start-up of a guaranteed thermonuclear, biological, and chemical scalar war that will destroy all life on this planet.
And what's the time scale? What
Timescale.
would the timescale be for this?
I don't have all the answers at this point in time,
Sure.
but I can give you some of the signs. The
What's your
first thing
best
is
guess?
the
Okay.
the signs basically are this: when they divide the city of Jerusalem, Jewish rabbis, and this is rabbinical law, have to have all the elements, the kalal, the Jas's red heifer, they have to have the kohanim and all the instruments. They can set up a tabernacle overnight. They have everything, the sea cows and the curtains and everything. They can put it on the Temple Mount in one evening, okay? But once they start that sacrifice, which has to happen on the Feast of David, that starts the final clock ticking. That clock will start on that day, and exactly 1,230 days later is the Feast of Purim, which goes back to Haman. And people say, well, why would these things be encoded like the Bible code in the Bible? It's because you're having voice and intentions from the highest creator of the universe that's speaking down through the higher dimensional planes to our world, that imprints on a supernatural book that transcends time and space, which is in the Bible. That's why the Bible code's there. People say, well, why are those things there? It's there because it transcends the dimensional planes of time space, because it's beyond time space.
Yeah. But the Illuminati know all this. They've already got this.
Well, they're trying to steer the timeline away from its intention, because the future is not solid; it's liquid.
Sure.
We have a role to play here. And when I was brought to the council, they were saying, you need to take this seriously. It's not written. It's not determined at this point in existence or revelation of the Spirit what will be that pathway, whether we will go into a birthing room and have a wonderful delivery of mankind, or whether we will have an annihilation of the human race. Mm-hmm. Or something in between where a great deal of destruction occurs and a tiny remnant survives.
No.
And
Okay.
that's what
Right.
we're facing.
So why are you here in Oceanside, for example?
I don't completely know. I know one of the
purposes
is to be here.